Hello and welcome to the library. My name is Serdd and I am your host and narrator. I apologize for the later start. We're running about 17 minutes behind, only because we had some slight technical difficulties, but hopefully, fingers crossed, knock on wood, we're all set and ready to go. I say that and watch something else fail. Okay, so today we will be continuing on with Married Thrice to Salted Fish. I know that we've been waiting a while for the chapters to update for us to get enough updates to carry on. So let me just make sure that everything is completely and properly up and running, and then we will get started. So how's everyone's week going? I know it's Tuesday. I was going to tweet this, but then I felt like it was probably a very stupid and ignorant thing to tweet, but I'm going, what? Oh, that's nice. But I'm going, I don't know how people do like a full work week. Like that Monday to Friday, same place, same people, same everything, day in and day out. I don't know how people do it. I can't. I know this about myself. I'm not good at it. Well, it's not that I'm not good at it. I find it really, really tough to continually keep doing the same thing over and over. Oh, oh crap. Let me just, oh shit. Just a second. I thought I had everything up and going. Apparently I'm not. So let me just, it says that I'm alive, but it's not counting me as live. So let me just, yeah, we're in reading fun. We're reading Married Thrice to Salted Fish. So why in reading fun does it say that no one's live? That's worrisome. Let me go back and maybe it was just a time thing. Maybe we got started too early and it doesn't actually count yet. Oh. So I'm a big fanfic reader. Like that's all I read usually. Old Danmei and fanfic, obviously. But recently there was a Danmei where the first few chapters caught my attention. It's still saying that I'm not live, so oh well. Am I on YouTube at least? Yeah, so there's a new story that I discovered, and the first few chapters that were translated properly caught my attention. And the premise was, it sounded very angsty, so I'm like, I'm there. And it is really good. And there was something about this one. Oh, good. So yeah, I'm up on YouTube live at least, so that's something. If you can't find me on Twitch, I'm on YouTube, and vice versa. Excuse me. But there's something about this one that I'm like, okay, the premise is good. The story, like the actual story itself, is good. So yeah, let's get into this. And it only at that time had only updated to like chapter 8. So I'm like, okay, well, when does it update? Sporadically. Ugh. So whenever a story says that it updates sporadically, don't count on it. So I found. So usually I'll wait. I'll just wait for them to update whenever. But there was something about this one. I'm like, no, I want to know how it keeps going. So I actually decided that I was gonna find the raws and just read the raw like Google translated version, and it's really good. So, where I was going with this is I have just discovered. So, I've been in the world of fan fiction, reading and writing, since, I'm not going to date myself, for a very long time. When fan fiction first became a thing. And so naturally I started on the fanfiction.net, and then I went to wherever my latest fandom, their personal site, wherever that went. Oh, no. Sorry, it's not letting. So I'm trying to correct things as I go. There we go. And but yeah, so fanfiction.net was my main one. And then it was fairly recently, maybe 10 years ago, less than, I made the official move to AO3, Archive of Our Own. And I've been there ever since. I've always poo-pooed Wattpad because when I had tried, looking for something new, and I had tried Wattpad and it just didn't fucking work for me because I was old school. If I was going to post a story or something, it was, you post it as one big thing and then you press send and go. But it had a bunch of like little bits and pieces where people could comment, and I didn't understand it at the time. And I was of the impression, and still am at some things, where if it's new, fuck it, I like my old way. And it's just the new one trying to horn in on the old guy and trying to push the old guy out of the way. So I didn't have a lot of respect or like Wattpad at all. And whenever said, oh, it's on Wattpad, I kind of turned my nose up at it. All that is to say, for this story that I was reading, this Danmei that I was reading, I found it through, the MTLers, where it has just the Google version of the translation of the Danmei. And it was like chapter 28, and it was all just gibberish. And the only place that had a properly translated version of this chapter was someone who had transcribed it on Wattpad. So I go in, okay, I'm watching, and I see these little numbers beside certain paragraphs. And I go, ooh, what are these? So I click on it, and it's comments. So I love this idea. I absolutely love this idea that while you're reading, you get to a paragraph or something happens, and there's a little plus mark, and you press the plus mark, and you actually get to write in comments, and you can all comment together. So many times you'll be reading and it's like, oh, that's a good part, or oh, that's a good part, or I have an opinion on this. But then by the time you get to the bottom of the chapter, you can't fucking remember what your opinion was, right? Unless you stop and jot it down, and none of us ever fucking do that. So I love this idea. I'm becoming a menace. I'm like, ooh, I got opinions. So yeah, I will absolutely be recommending this story. Actually, yeah, let me do it now. Let me just get it up and ready. I will show you two versions. I will show you the properly translated version where you can get it, and also the Wattpad one. So, for the properly translated version, we're going to go to my favorite site for my Danmei. Pull it up here. Now, the title might be a little... What is that? Your husband's leg is broken is literally the name of the story. Not this one. Sorry, there was one that just came up. Sorry. Ooh. That updated. Okay. The title might be a little off-putting, but go with me on this. After getting gayified, I swore off parody mashups. What? Sorry. That's not the one. That's not it. But I want to pull both of them up first before I recommend them. If you're listening to this on the podcast, please bear with me. I will do my best to narrate everything that people are actually seeing. So let me just do this. And then on Wattpad, yes. Yes. Okay, we're going to duplicate this because this has some stages and I don't want anyone to get lost. Okay. Okay, over to the reading screen. Oh. Allow me to use my very slow, only sometimes working Stream Deck. Where are we going? We're going to go to the reading page because I want you to see what I'm looking at. Yosh. Okay. Okay. Mm-mm-mm-mm-mm-mm. Sorry, I'm just resizing my page so that everyone can see everything. So you can see, so you can see. So you can see. Okay. All right. So, oh, Jesus. Get that back in here. Okay. So, this one that I'm currently reading, and I've read up to chapter 46, I want to say, maybe. So, I'm in it. It only has 93 official chapters plus 11 extras, so 104 in total. I think that's the same size as The Wife is First. But it's called After Rebirth, I Became the Scum Gong's Uncle's Destined Omega. It's really fucking good. Now, oops, sorry. I need that new arm. When I first read this, I read this as that the uncle was the Scum Gong. No, that's not a spoiler. That's in there. So it's available. The translations, a very good version of the translations, are available on Chrysanthemum Garden. And I'll take you over to the Wattpad site in a moment, but I just want to go through this. So this one is not my regular. This one is an interstellar one. It's not a historical one, or a xianxia one. So this is space, sci-fi, futuristic. I'm really not a big fan of space and sci-fi. I don't like it. The idea of having to live in space absolutely scares the piss out of me. So I'm not usually a fan, but this one's cool. This one is more, it deals a lot in like mech and machines and artificial intelligence. And oh my God, one of the best, absolute best characters in it is an artificial intelligence called Housekeeper. And he's fabulous. So the tags for this, it is a BL, it is drama, it is Omegaverse. That's a big one. Well, it's right in the title. I don't know why I said that. Second Chances, Rebirth, and Interstellar, which we've already went over. Synopsis of this. In his past life, the beta Su Liang dared to seduce. That's a fucking lie. Fucking lie. He didn't seduce him. They were in a dedicated relationship. There was no seducing. Anyways, I have opinions. Dared to seduce Lu Jiejiu, the future of the Liu family, and eloped. So they eloped together. In the end, after burning down all his boats with no hesitation, Su Liang realized that he was nothing but a big joke. Su Liang gave up everything and died silently on the day after Lu Jijiao's marriage to someone else. It was fucking tragic. Reliving a life, the courageous fool of that year finally learned to accept his fate, which should be accept being a beta. This time, Su Liang honestly accepted that he was an unfavored and mediocre beta. Not true. He's like incredibly smart. It's really frustrating. Feeling that this bland and undemanding life was quite good. After all, the way of the salted fish is the best way. It's another salted fish. He's not anything like salted fish. He's not. Don't let, actually this summary is crap. Don't let any of this fool you. But after just a few peaceful days, he was sent into the forbidden area, in the depths of the noble's compound. This is really not a good summary, like at all. Liu Taipan, who used to be a big boss, is now a big boss, who will always be the kind of sinister and ruthless big boss who would make everyone tremble with fear when he comes out. This is so stupid. However, it was this top-level alpha who single-handedly supported the Liu family, but suffered from pheromone disorder. And the place where he rested was a forbidden place in the eyes of everyone. No matter how many things Su Liang thought about, he didn't expect Liu Taipan to embrace him in the frenzy of his pheromone disorder. Then he bit the back of his neck with a single bite. Your pheromones smells good. The devil-like man, like a beast, scented the pheromones on his body and muttered greedily. Su Liang was horrified to discover that Liu Taipan and him were more and more intimate. He, who was supposed to be a beta, somehow began to develop unusual pheromone glands. From a beta, he was now an omega. Moreover, he was an omega who matched perfectly with Liu Taipan. So you can see why, just from that summary, why I thought the uncle was the Scum Gong? No. So this summary is shit. I didn't realize this until I finished reading it. There's 9 chapters have already been translated. So this is a terrible summary. So in his past life, Su Liang dared to seduce. No. So this Liu Jiejiu is the upcoming head of the Liu family. The main character are Gong, eventual Gong. Liu Taipan is the actual current head of the family. He's like this war general, biggest bad kind of guy. And he's young and handsome. So I'm like, this isn't... it doesn't quite work. Anyways, so Su Liang and Liu Jiejiao, they ran away together, they eloped, but it was Liu Jiejiao who's like, my family will never accept us, but run away with me and we'll live out, we'll prove to them that we can be together, that we can be happy. But because Liu Jiejiao is an alpha, his family's going to say, no, you have to be with an omega. Here's the one we want you to be with. And so that's where that Liu Jiejiao's marriage to someone else. It's, even if you just read those first few chapters, it's really good. It's quite tragic. And I love this Su Liang character. They don't portray him well in this. So he's incredibly smart. Like, he's the best in his university, and it's a top scale university that no one else in the Liu family can even get into because it's purely on merit and no one else is smart enough. So, and he's very kind, but he's, they keep describing him as like, they keep describing him as a wild cat, but I don't really get that persona from him. So, but yeah, he's very much like, yes, he's a beta, secret, or turns into an omega. I don't know how that's going to turn out yet. I haven't gotten to that yet. He's still firmly being classified as a beta. But yeah, so Su Liang is very good. And I'm worried for him. But his Liu Jiejiao is a complete asshole. And Liu Taipan is a good guy. Like, even in the, like, they pointed here that he's a monster and it's awful, and embraces him in a frenzy and his pheromone disorder. And then he bit the back of his neck with a single bite. He bit a lot more times. But I'm not going to spoil it. But he's a good guy. We like him. We genuinely really like him. And I was not prepared to hate Liu Jiejiao as much as I do, but fuck. Oh. It's very good. It's less court intrigue than a lot of my other stories, and more personal intrigue. So there's a lot of unanswered questions here. But just know that if you're not a fan or you don't understand the Omegaverse very well, I wouldn't say you have to know it very, very well, but you have to know the basic principles of alpha, beta, omega. So that would help, because they don't go into it. And so if you don't know what a pheromone is, you're going to be a little bit lost. But yeah, so I will show you now where I'm getting this from. So just Google, because it'll be hard to find anyways, just Google the name of it. So after birth, I became the Scum Gong's uncle's destined omega. Probably don't have to do the whole thing, and then just Wattpad, because you can't find it in the actual website. It's only on someone's list. So I'm not even going to try and pronounce it. AWSM underscore OLIEE underscore comma apostrophe S reading list dash at Wattpad. So you go into there, scroll to the top because it won't take you to the top, it'll take you to the middle, and get out of there. And then it's the second from the top. And yes, I very highly recommend this. It was very good. Okay, let me try this. This is the translated, Google translated summary. In his previous life as a beta, Su Liang was bold enough to seduce the future of the Lu family, the pillar Lu Jiejiao, and eloped. As a result, after the run, Su Liang realized that his own failure to turn his back on the boat was just a big joke. So keep in mind that this is straight translated. It can be a little janky. Su Liang gave everything and finally died silently on the day Lu Jiejiao married someone else. After reliving the first life, the reckless and fearless fool finally learned to accept his fate. This time, Su Liang honestly stood in front of the mediocre beta that he was, and he was not favored, and felt that it was actually a good day to have no desires and not be desired. After all, salted fish is king. So yeah, it's all here. And it's very good. So far, very good. I promised before that I would not recommend any stories until after I'd gotten past chapter 20. So now as I'm into chapter like in the 45, 46, 47 range, I firmly recommend this story. It's quite good. Oh, so how long have I been jabbering? 23 minutes. Oh, excuse me. So, today, moving right along, today we will be continuing with chapter 67 of Married Thrice to Salted Fish by Bikabi. I hope that this is the right chapter. Let me just triple check one more time, because I'm fairly certain, but are we just going to make sure? Yes. Okay, so the last time we read this, we finished on 66. Yes, we're on chapter 67 now, and I can't quite remember where we were. But I hope this goes well. Oh, that's right. They had just gotten married. Oh, shit. That's right. They had just gotten married. Letting you... Lin Qingyu was indeed angry. Let's see here. If I died, okay, so I'm just going to go from this last paragraph, just as a refresher. If I died, I just thought it would be easier for you to forget about me if you didn't know my name. Oh, that's right. So Lin Qingyu was pissed because Gufu Zhou, when he was young Master Hou, didn't tell him his name, even at the end. It's over. It's over. Let's see here. Letting you touch my abs isn't enough to coax you anymore. So how about I let you rub your face against it? He was already so angry, but this man was still in the mood to joke. Then Qingyu was completely expressionless. Forget it. I'm afraid of ruining my face. So yeah. Oops. No, it should be this. Okay. Let me do one more yawn though. What? Let's get started. Chapter 67. Don't marry a slacker who is younger than yourself. That's a life lesson. After Lin Qingyu's remarriage, Huan Tong and Hua Lu also came to the general's mansion. Both of them had a very tangled feelings towards Gufu Zhou. Huan Tong was still fine, He was Lin Qingyu's person, after all. No matter what Lin Qingyu wanted to do, he would support it wholeheartedly. Although he too felt a little pity for young Master Hou. The general was simply too heroic. Take, for example, yesterday. The general had angered the young master for some reason, and in order to amuse the young master, the general went to the training grounds and put on a show for him, breaking slabs of stone on his chest. Idiot. Were it young Master Hou, would he have been able to do something like that? Forget breaking those slabs, even just having those slabs press against young Master Hu's stomach, and within half an hour he would have died. Man seeks his way up, just as water seeks its way down. If his family's young master wanted to remarry, he had to marry someone who was more powerful. There was nothing wrong with that. There was no need to speak of Hualu. She was Lu Wancheng's closest maid. When Lu Wancheng was still alive, he treated her like a younger sister. The reason why she was willing to follow Lin Qingyu was because of her respect and love for Lin Qingyu. But even more than that, it was because of young Master Hou. She knew that the one young Master Hou had been most concerned about, the one he had worried about most, was Lin Qingyu. And so she wanted to stand in for young Master Hou and stay by Lin Qingyu's side to look after him. However, Lin Qingyu seemed to have completely forgotten about young Master Hou. He and General Gu were newlyweds, and they were stuck together all the time. They even had the bunk bed specially designed by young Master Hou moved into the bridal chamber. If young Master Hou, out there in the afterlife, knew of this, oh, how sad he would be. While it was true that she admired the general, if she were made to choose, she would definitely stand with young Master Hou. Hualu was someone of no sophistication. Her thoughts were writ all over her face. Her eyes, whenever she looked at Gu Fuzhou, were always filled with a bit of resentment. Gu Fuzhou could guess what she was thinking. She was ready to make some trouble. Aw, little lamb. The end of the year was approaching. It was getting colder and colder. Although it had yet to snow, the wind was already bitingly cold, like a knife cutting against one's face. Who knew what had gotten into Gu Fuzhou? Instead of staying in a nice warm room, he insisted on taking Lin Qingyu to the yard for dinner. Gu Fuzhou ordered someone to bring out a stove with charcoal burning underneath and a large washed stone covering the top. When the stone turned hot, Gu Fuzhou brushed a layer of oil on it and placed the meats finely cut by the cook on it to grill. The hot oil lowered along the grains of the meat. It made a sizzling sound, tempting people's fingers into twitching. Lin Qingyu saw it as a novelty. It was the first time he had seen this way of eating. Gu Fuzhou grilled a few pieces of mutton first, then put it into Lin Qingyu's bowl. "Qingyu, try it." Lin Qingyu took a small bite and said reservedly, "The only thing I can say is that it isn't normal. The mutton taste is very strong." "Don't you eat mutton for the mutton flavor?" Gu Fuzhou picked up a piece that was lined with both lean and fat. "Try this one. Open your mouth." After hesitating for a while, Lin Qingyu opened his mouth and allowed Gu Fuzhou to put it into his mouth. Looking from out the corner of his eye, Gu Fuzhou saw Hualu, who was sitting to one side, and the aggrieved look in her eyes. He raised his voice and asked, "Qingyu, did you ever have barbecue with your former husband?" Lin Qingyu. I got new effects, so we're hoping they work. What was wrong with this person? Gufu Zhou rubbed his chin and said, "This general has heard that the young Master Hou was so weak that he had to use a wheelchair wherever he went, and couldn't eat these greasy things. What kind of fun could you have had with him before?" "What the general said is correct," Lin Qingyu said coolly. "I can only say that it is fortunate that young Master Hou died early." Hua Lu stared at Lin Qingyu in disbelief. "Young master, how can you say such a thing?" Gufu Zhou asked again. "Then who do you like more, young Master Hou or this general?" Lin Qingyu rolled his eyes. "Have you nothing better to talk about?" A great beauty rolling his eyes can also be pleasing to the eye. Gufu Zhou said with a smile, "You can tell me the truth. This general isn't going to drink vinegar of a dead man." Seeing that Hua Lu was almost to the point of tears, Lin Qingyu said, "Then I prefer young Master Hou." Hua Lu was moved. "Young master." Gufu Zhou put on an expression of surprise and disappointment, all the while not forgetting to continue feeding Lin Qingyu. "How could this be? Has this general done anything that isn't to his wife's liking?" Lin Qingyu's lips curved into a smile. "Young Master Hou is younger and more beautiful than the general. I like them young and beautiful. Is there anything wrong with that?" Gufu Zhou. Lin Qingyu saw that the beef that Gufu Zhou gave him was still red and said, "This is not cooked yet." Gufu Zhou told him, Beef is delicious when it's medium rare." Lin Qingyu threw the medium rare beef onto Gufu Zhou's bowl with disgust. "Then why didn't you just let it bask in the sun instead? It will taste better if it's cooked." Lin Qingyu's "I like them young and beautiful" kept Gufu Zhou from sleeping that night. Lin Qingyu slept on the bottom bunk, and from time to time he could hear him turning over, making him unable to sleep. "Aren't you the type to fall asleep as soon as your head touches the pillow?" Lin Qingyu asked. "What's the matter today?" Gufu Zhou rolled down from the bed, sat down beside Lin Qingyu, and asked worriedly, "Qingyu, do you really like Wancheng's body more?" So it was for this matter. Both Wancheng and Gufu Zhou were first-class handsome men, but they were handsome in different ways. Wancheng was noble, while Gufu Zhou was heroic. Either one was very pleasing to the eyes. But if he were to choose, he still preferred Gufu Zhou's current body. Being healthy, free from illness and diseases, was more important than anything else. Lin Qingyu could see that Gufu Zhou really worried about this issue, so he stopped teasing and told him the truth. In terms of outward appearance, Wancheng and Gufu Zhou each have their own advantages. Inwardly, they are all you. As long as it is As long as it is you, it makes no difference to me. A smile slowly appeared on Gufu Zhou's face. It was windy at night, and he was only wearing pajamas, so it was inevitable that he was a little cold. Gufu Zhou put his hand into Lin Qingyu's quilt. Laying on the edge of the bed, he said, "You said it so nicely, but if I had transferred into someone this time, you definitely wouldn't let me put my hand into your quilt." Lin Qingyu couldn't deny it. That's true. I would have chopped them off for you. Although he wouldn't go so far as to solely judge someone by their appearance, a marriage would mean that husband and wife would have to look at each other every day. If it were someone too ugly, it would inevitably influence his feelings. Gufuzhou's hands gradually began to misbehave, but no amount of misbehaving allowed him to go past a bottom line. The furthest he went was secretly pinching Lin Qingyu's waist. However, there was absolute no excess fat to pinch. The author of Hua's refusal of the monarch has certified. Wow, that was a big sound. The author of Hua's refusal of the monarch has certified that you be the most beautiful in the entire book. There is no one whose appearance could ever take your breath away. Lin Qingyu thought for a while and said, But there is someone whose appearance has taken my breath away. Really? Gufuzhou was doubtful. Who? Lin Qingyu looked at him. Really? Gufuzhou said unhappily, What does he look like? I've forgotten. As soon as he woke up from... Oh. What does he look like? I've forgotten. As soon as he woke up from that dream, he forgot. That breathless kind of feeling was the only thing he remembered. Someone good-looking enough to stun even you? How could you forget? And you have such a good memory, too. I don't know. Thinking of that dream, Lin Qingyu didn't want to give Gufuzhou something to brag about. He threw Gufuzhou's hand out from his quilt and said, Now shoo and go to sleep. Sorry, I'm not taking breaths. I'm forgetting to breathe. Oh. I see. On the third day after the wedding, the two returned to the Lin residence. The return ceremony had been prepared by Yuan Yin, and having received Gufuzhou's instructions, the gifts he brought back were twice as many as when he'd gone back the first time. The Lin residence's warehouse was so full that they had no choice but to empty out several more rooms to hold all the gifts. Gufuzhou and Lin Qingyu once again served tea to his parents. Afterwards, Gufuzhou took out a gift for Lin Qinghe, a saber that he used when he was young. It was just right for Lin Qinghe to use at his age. Lin Qinghe accepted his gift and said in a prim and proper voice, Thank you, General. Lin Qinghe had been taught very well by his parents and older brother. In front of outsiders, he carried himself like the young son of a noble family. He only acted like a spoiled child in front of his family. When Gufuzhou was still Wancheng, he was one of the targets of his spoiled antics. Seeing Lin Qinghe treating... It's taking everyone some time. Seeing Lin Qinghe treating him like such an outsider, he couldn't help but say, Qinghe, how did you call young Master Hou before? Thinking of Lu Wancheng, Lin Qinghe pursed his lips and said sadly, I call him Wancheng, Gaga. Then you can call me the same way, too. Lin Qingyu secretly glanced at his brother and seeing him nod, said, "All right, Uncle Gu." Gu Fuzhou's face cracked. Mother Lin hurriedly said, "Qingyu, don't call him that. You've messed up your seniorities." Lin Qingyu, taking pleasure over the other's misfortune, said, "The general is more than 20 years older than Qingyu. Asking him to call the general Gege would be forcing him to do the impossible." He's so mean and I love him. After returning from the Lin residence, Gu Fuzhou fell into a depressed mood. He wasn't depressed at being called uncle. Rather, it was because his 3-day marriage leave... It was because his 3-day marriage leave was over, and tomorrow he had to get up early to go to court once again. Yeah, he would hate that. There was one person in the general's mansion who was even more depressed than Gu Fuzhou, and that was Yan Yin. Yan Yin found Lin Qingyu and said with a wry smile, "I will have to ask the madam to wake up the general tomorrow." Lin Qingyu said indifferently, "All right, don't worry about it." Yan Yin could not worry, and he said a few more words. "Having just been married, I'm afraid the madam might not know. Since the general returned from Yongliang, he seems to be suffering from hypersomnia. No matter how much I call to him, he will not wake up. I humbly request the madam to start waking the general half an hour in advance to give the general some extra time." Oh my god. He's a high schooler. Lin Qingyu gave him a meaning-laden smile. "It may be that I have more experience than you in getting him up." Yan Yin was greatly shocked. He also didn't dare to ask any more questions. He said with an appeasing smile, "Then I will have to trouble the madam." Morning court in the Dayu was set at Maoxi, 5 a.m. to 7 a.m., and officials would usually get up at the 5th watch, 4 a.m. When the time came, Lin Qingyu finished washing and dressing, then went to wake Gu Fuzhou by once again pinching his nose shut. They're so antagonistic and I love them so much. I can't even. General, it's time to go to court." Gu Fuzhou held painfully onto the quilt. "I don't want to go to court. Qingyu, I don't want to go to court." "What's the use of telling me?" Gu Fuzhou closed his eyes. "I've decided. I'm going to take a leave of absence. Or, better yet, I'll just simply go back to being a civilian." Lin Qingyu ignored him, quickly and ruthlessly pulling off his quilt. He then summoned the servants to wait upon Gu Fuzhou to wash up. Gu Fuzhou was irritable in the mornings, and his face was frighteningly gloomy. The sternness of his expression had great terrorizing power, and it deterred people from approaching. Lin Qingyu asked the maid serving him to dress. To withdraw, taking her place to personally help Gu Fuzhou on his official uniform. Gu Fuzhou looked down at Lin Qingyu, who was earnestly fastening his belt. The greater part of his irritability vanished. He asked, "Qingyu, will you see me off to court?" Lin Qingyu raised his eyes and glanced at him. "How old are you that you still need someone to send you to court?" Gu Fuzhou didn't feel the least bit of shame. "I heard from Wu Jian that every time he leaves his house, his wife sends him off, and every morning he comes back, he can even enjoy her home-cooked soup. I'm really envious. Of course, I can't bear thinking of you making soup. After all, Dr. Lin's hands are made for handling greater things." Gufu Zhou babbled on and on. Lin Qingyu picked up his official cap. When he tried to put it on him, he found that he couldn't reach Gufu Zhou's head. He said, "Bow your head." Gufu Zhou bent down so that Lin Qingyu could help him put it on. Lin Qingyu looked at Gufu Zhou and said, "I'll send the general to court." Gufu Zhou was momentarily stunned. He then smiled and said, "I was joking. It's cold outside. Just stay at home and wait for me to come back." "Don't talk nonsense." Lin Qingyu put on a snow-white fox fur robe. "Let's go." Gufu Zhou chuckled to himself and followed after Lin Qingyu. He said, "Qingyu, do you know how they say, 'Don't talk nonsense' in my hometown?" "How?" "Stop it with your BB." "I'll keep that in mind," Lin Qingyu said. "But don't you hate it when I speak in your hometown dialect?" Gufu Zhou heaved a sigh. "You've already learned it, so you may as well learn more. If you manage to go to my hometown someday, you'll be able to freely communicate with my fellow townsmen." Lin Qingyu only saw him off at the gate of the general's mansion. He watched Gufu Zhou leave in the carriage, then said to Hua Lu behind him, "Hua Lu, do you now understand?" Hua Lu didn't understand at all. Sorry. He watched Gufu Zhou leave in the carriage, then said to Hua Lu behind him, "Hua Lu, do you now understand?" Hua Lu didn't understand at all. She shook her head blankly. "Young master, what is it that I am supposed to understand?" Lin Qingyu sneered. "In the future, never marry a younger bag of lazybones. Otherwise, you may have to send him off to court in the cold of every morning." Hua Lu understood, but also didn't. Just where was this bag of lazybones who was younger than the master? Who was younger than the young master? He's inside a big case of that hulking mountain that he just sent off to court. The author has something to say. Oops. "Ooh, I'm ready to get to the plot. Do you like this kind of daily life? Can the extras all be such a daily life?" So the extras are all going to be them just hanging out and chilling. Let me hydrate. So yeah, I'm going to add that after Rebirth Danmei to my list of possible ones to read on here. Oh, I can't see it, but according to the reflection on the trees, we're having a very pretty sunset. Excuse me. I feel like these are a lot longer than The Wife is First. Excuse me. Oh, shit, wrong one. This is why I need a bigger one. Chapter 68. Are you trying to dirty me again? Eh? In morning court, all the ministers were discussing the war between the Dayu and the Xiexia. Xiexia had launched a comeback, and they would even changed their chief commander. The way their army marched was completely different from before. Jiao Mingwei could not find any clue how to counter. After 3 consecutive small defeats, he adopted a conservative strategy, falling back to defend the city, avoid leaving. He was now asking the capital for help. In his letter, Jiao Mingwei repeatedly emphasized that he was not qualified to be the head general, and he asked His Majesty to send General Gu to take over command as soon as possible. The emperor atop his throne looked down at his ministers. Xiao Qiang stood at the head of this group of ministers. Nowadays, the imperial family's father and son looked quite similar. Both had sickly complexions. They were thin and haggard. The emperor put his hand on his forehead, his brows furrowed. The minister's petitions were incessant, assaulting in his ears. Mixed with Xiao Qiang's muffled coughs from time to time, it gave him a splitting headache. Xiao Qiang too was expanding all his willpower to attend court. Since Shen Huaixi's sword had injured his left lung. Now, not unless some miracle-working doctor were to suddenly appear, he would not be able to live out his life like a normal person. You do have a miracle-working doctor, but he fucking hates you. Another person expanding his willpower to attend court was Gu Fuzhou. He stood ramrod straight, his eyes lowered. People who saw him thought he was deep in contemplation. Probably sleeping with his eyes open. Or closed. General Gu and young Master Lin had only just gotten married. Are we to drive him back to the battlefield? Their marriage bed had yet to even warm. The one who spoke was General Wu Jian, who was good friends with Gu Fuzhou. The Prime Minister stroked his beard and said, General Wu's words are wrong. Only when one has a country can one have a family. Faced with this natural crisis, does General Gu intend to abandon the 300,000-strong army in the northwest because of his reluctance to leave a land of warmth and tenderness? He means the marriage bed. Wu Jian grumbled and swore. What national crisis? Minister Tui exaggerates the situation. Aren't these just a few Xixia bandits? Wu Jian stepped forward and knelt down. Your Majesty, you give me 10,000 elite soldiers and I will go to the northwest to support General Zhao immediately. Within 3 months I shall bring to the Deu a great victory. The Prime Minister shook his head and said, You speak conceited nonsense, overestimating your abilities. Wu Jian said, brimming with anger. I overestimate my abilities? Then you go do it! The Emperor listened to the two arguing, saying nothing, moving not an inch, and without even any change in his expression. Suddenly, he said, Crown Prince, what do you think of this matter? Xiao Qiang seemed to not have heard. His expression remained unchanged, his thoughts obviously straying from the present. The Emperor called out sharply, Crown Prince! Xiao Qiang finally came back to his senses and said, Your humble son agrees. You agree? And whose proposal are you agreeing to? Of course, it's to Minister Tui's. Xiao Qiang coughed again. Your humble son is unwell, and has been discourteous before the court. I hope my imperial father may forgive me. In consideration for Xiao Qiang's condition, the Emperor held back his anger. He then asked Gu Fuzhou, Gu Wancheng, what do you think? Gu Fuzhou. After being ignored twice in a row, the emperor couldn't bear it any longer. Let's see here. He slammed his hand on the table and shouted angrily, "Gufu-zhou!" Gufu-zhou opened his eyes. There was a lightning-quick flash of confusion in his eyes. When he saw Wu Zhen kneeling in front of the emperor, his posture that was requesting the emperor to allow him to be dispatched, Gufu-zhou could already make a guess what the emperor was asking. Though General Wu is talented and outstanding leader of troops, his talents lay not in formulating overall tactics. I think he is more suitable to leading the vanguard. Wu Zhen kept throwing pointed looks at Gufu-zhou, but Gufu-zhou just pretended not to see them. Moreover, the terrain in the northwest is mostly plains and deserts. General Wu's experience lay in naval battles. Sending him to the northwest would not be suitable. Gufu-zhou's words were reasonable and well-founded, and the emperor could not find any fault. He had no choice but to adjust his tone and say, Gu Aiqing. Gu Aiqing's words are reasonable. Wu Zhen is indeed not suitable for command of the northwest. The Prime Minister took the opportunity to say, General Gu has been stationed in the northwest for many years. No one knows how to march in those plains and deserts better than the general. There is no one more suitable than General Gu to command in the northwest. The Minister of War agreed. The general's secret return to the capital was to dispel the sky spider poison. Now the poison has been resolved, and the general has also been married with great fanfare. The matter of the general's return to the capital has long ceased to be a secret. Xie, too, has learned about the head general's absence in young Liang, and they dare to act so recklessly. If the general does not return to stabilize the army's morale, I'm afraid it will only further embolden Xie. Gufu-zhou's brows furrowed. Hand to his chest, he said, Allow me to lead the troops to battle. Wu Jian hurriedly said, No! Although the sky spider poison has been resolved, the successive poisonings has long damaged the general's body. The doctor said that if the general wishes to live past a few years, he must stay in the capital to recuperate. The doctor Wu Jian spoke of was none other than Gufu-zhou's new wife. A few days ago, Wu Jian went to the general's mansion as a guest, and General Gu, without bothering with trifles, asked his new wife to drink at the same table. It was then that the general's wife revealed about the general's condition to him. Gufu-zhou said solemnly, Before the needs of the nation, I wish to place the matter of my life and death aside. How can that possibly be? The general's very life and death is a matter that concerns the nation. If he were forced to return to the northwest at this time, causing a relapse, would this not be even more to the liking of the Xixia thieves? The emperor's headache was getting unbearable. He had been expecting Xiao Cheng to step up and preside over the overall situation, but apart from replying to him, Xiao Cheng had not said a word. Who knew what he was thinking? He had such high hopes for the crown prince. How did things turn out like this? The matter of the head general will be set aside for a later discussion. For now... Oh, there was no quotations. The matter of the head general will be set aside for later discussion. For now, come up with a temporary plan to provide Jiao Mingwei a plan of action. This session for morning court is done. The emperor, physically and mentally exhausted, got to his feet and immediately staggered, feeling dizzy. All the ministers got to their knees. We ask the emperor to look after his health. After the ministers were dismissed, Gufu Zhou and Wu Jian walked out together. Wu Jian asked him,
General, why won't you let me go to the northwest?
Gufu Zhou said,
You are fundamentally ill-suited for battle in the northwest.
Having him go would only be giving the enemy another head. It was unnecessary.
But if I don't go, the general will have to go.
Wu Jian joked.
Could it be that the general is willing to leave his new wife to spend several years in the desolate northwest? Naturally, I am most unwilling,
Gufu Zhou said, eloquent and rousing.
A man of character aspires to travel far and make one's mark. How could one be confined to but one place in the universe for love?
Wu Jian was immediately filled with deep veneration.
The general is truly a model for my generation.
After separating from Wu Jian, Gufu Zhou saw a eunuch carrying a vase heading in his direction. The vase was half as high as a person. Carrying it, it was impossible to see the path ahead. The eunuch who was guiding Gufu Zhou out was afraid that this person would block General Gu's way, so he said, Xiao Xiongxi, you have to slow down.
Xiao Xiongxi,
Gufu Zhou asked.
Could this be Xiao Xiongxi of Qingjiang Hall?
With much difficulty, Xiao Xiongxi managed to stick his head out from behind the vase. Seeing Gufu Zhou, he hurriedly said, Replying to the general, This one is indeed on duty at Qingjiang Hall. The corners of Gufu Zhou's lips tucked up slightly.
I have long looked forward to meeting you.
Xiao Xiongxi was overwhelmed by the unexpected favor. What virtue could a eunuch like himself have that the general would anticipate making his acquaintance? The general jests. It is this servant who has long wished for the honor of meeting the mighty general.
You are being humble.
Gufu Zhou turned to the eunuch who was leading the way for him.
Please allow Xiao Xiongxi to be the one to see me out.
The eunuch who led the way took the vase from Xiao Xiongxi and stepped back. Gufu Zhou said,
I have heard the madam mention you.
Xiao Xiongxi said, Dr. Lin, the general's wife, used to treat us servants. Sorry. Dr. Lin, the general's wife, used to treat us servants. Gufu Zhou nodded lightly and asked,
Did the emperor's headaches not already get better? Why is his complexion so terrible today?
Xiao Xiongxi, worthy of his name Xiao Xiongxi, said without any hesitation,
Oh yeah, he's the gossip.
Replying to the general, the emperor was indeed much better before, but when the winter came, the headache suddenly intensified once again. Medicine and acupuncture proved no use. Even Lin Panyan is at a loss. Gufu Zhou returned to the general's mansion. Before he could even ask, Yan Yin said,
The madam should be in the study now.
Gufu Zhou handed his official's hat to Yan Yin and headed straight for the study. The door of the study was open. Pushing aside the wind-blocked curtain, he saw Lin Qingyu dressed in white, sitting by the window, studying a game of chess. He held a chess manual in one hand, while the fingertip of the other carelessly rolled the black piece. Though bright and vibrant of face, his temperament was as cold as the moon, as though he were placed far above the mandatory of the world. That's spelled very wrong. As though he were placed far above the mundane of the world. Huan Tong was positioned to one side, quietly adding charcoal to the stove.
Damn. Please let him be confined evermore to one place for love.
What did a man of character aspiring to travel far and make his mark have anything to do with him? He just wanted to be able to sleep until he wakes up naturally, and then stay at home and indulge in the sight of this beauty. Lin Qingyu was so engrossed in studying the chess match that he didn't notice him entering, until he heard a familiar voice.
Lin Qingyu.
Lin Qingyu looked up and said,
What's wrong? What do you mean, what's wrong? You never call me Lin Qingyu.
Gufu Zhou asked deliberately.
Then how do I usually call you? Qingyu or Dr. Lin?
Lin Qingyu frowned.
Did something happen? It's nothing.
Gufu Zhou smiled a little wickedly.
Oh, if it isn't Wancheng, I guess we should keep the lovey-dovey to a minimum. He's not even married yet. Seeing us all close and affectionate might make him sad.
Wancheng said indignantly.
I won't!
Lin Qingyu said, displeased.
Next time, don't call me by my full name. I'm not used to it.
Gufu Zhou coughed twice, not wanting to appear too proud of himself.
I'll try my best.
Gufu Zhou slumped across from Lin Qingyu, picked up a white piece, and tossed it back and forth. He said, sounding offhand,
Qingyu, your marriage leave is probably coming to an end.
Lin Qingyu had mentioned to Gufu Zhou before that the prescription for the Emperor's headache included the wings of a golden silkworm goo. The golden silkworm goo took different forms for each season, and the preparation for the medicine would also change accordingly. Even his father didn't understand the subtleties of it. As the weather grows colder, the previous prescription would gradually lose effect. If the Emperor did not want to be tormented by the headaches once again, he was left with no choice but to invite Lin Qingyu back. Lin Qingyu was not at all surprised by this matter.
Is that so?
Not long after, Hua Lu came to call them to dinner. After dinner, Gufu Zhou went bitterly to the training grounds to lift weights, and Lin Qingyu continued to the unfinished chess game. When the night grew dark, the two returned to their bedroom and went to bed. In the middle of the night, Lin Qingyu was awakened by thirst. What kind of thirst? He opened his eyes and saw that a light was burning in the room. It was Gufu Zhou who had lit a lamp, under whose light he wrote and pondered. Lin Qingyu had no idea what he could be writing. Lin Qingyu had been witness to a lot of times when Gufu Zhou did not act like his usual self. It was when he saw him occasionally being serious that he would remember that this person was every bit as scheming as he was. Only that most of the time, Lin Qingyu didn't bother to think about it. Lin Qingyu sat up. Gufu Zhou heard the movement and turned to look at him.
You're awake?
Sorry. Yeah, that was right.
You're awake? I'm thinking about how
wait, no. Oh, okay. No, it was different.
You're awake? I'm thinking about how Xia's new appointment chief commander uses his troops.
Gufu Zhou looked down at the enemy's marching route that he had received. Gufu Zhou looked down at the enemy's marching route that he had recreated based on his memory and what Zhao Mingwei had written in his report.
It's kind of interesting.
Then Qingyu asked,
Why don't you do this during the day?
Gufu Zhou said without hesitation,
Because I want to play during the day.
Lin Qingyu got out of bed. He put on an outer robe and poured himself a cup of tea.
So, are you worried about the war situation in the Northwest? No, I was just thinking about it casually.
Gufu Zhou started to write.
If he chooses to strive, let him strive. I choose to lie at home.
Lin Qingyu, taking precaution, took 2 steps back. He vigilantly watched the brush in Gufu Zhou's hand. Whenever Gufu Zhou held a brush while lost in thought, he was in danger of being splattered with ink.
Gufu Zhou paused. What's wrong?
Lin Qingyu said,
Are you trying to dirty me again?
Gufu Zhou was momentarily dazed. After confirming his own intentions, he said with a smile,
It's over. It seems I was thinking about it a bit.
The author has something to say. The male high school student actually wants to dirty the big beauty. You are no longer innocent. Okay, so let me see here. Okay. This is going to be my last one for tonight. Instead of doing 3. I know we said, I know I started late, but I figure an hour and a half should be okay. Plus, that makes it nice and even, so next time we can start at 70 and then go up. So. Oh, excuse me. Did you like my sound effect? That sound effect was actually a slamming door. I forgot that I needed the slamming desk, but I've got sound effects now, and I hope it actually showed up. Because when I would clap my hands as like a slap, it wasn't showing up properly. One more yawn. Okay, let's do this. Chapter 69. No matter how tired you are, you have to send your wife to work. Gufu Zhou really had thought about it. It was unbelievable. It wasn't that he hadn't thought about such things in his 19 years of life. Oh, we're still on dirtying the wife. Okay, I got you. Ooh, this may be spicy. Let's see. Any boy of sound mind and body would have had at least some of those kinds of thoughts going through puberty. He was no exception. At the age of 13 or 14, his father solemnly lectured him on physiology and asked him to maintain strict self-discipline and to always show respect for others in this regard. He remembered how he'd felt after... Okay, we're going straight into it. Warning. Okay. We're going straight into it. He remembered how he'd felt after jerking himself off for the first time. That's all? His hand was so sore it was about to fall off. That's all? Poor guy. Of course, it felt good, undeniably. But the cost performance ration wasn't really that high. Although he was lazy, he was quite particular about personal cleanliness. Even if he were just doing it himself, he had to take a shower before and after. The entire process took more than an hour. Wasn't this time better spent sleeping? Oh my god, I love you. Oh my god. Oh, that's so good. Oh, hell. Isn't this better spent? That's so good. Oh. Later, when he was 16 or 17, he found that his classmates, especially the boys, seemed to be very interested in this aspect. His brothers often shared with him some decidedly very un-PG rated things. His brothers would always be flushed with excitement, but he simply felt sorry for the male lead. After working for so long without stopping, after sweating so much, wouldn't his waist be absolutely sore? It's so tiring. He already felt tired just watching it. Oh my god. I have tears. You don't even know. When he told his brothers how he felt, his brothers were shocked and dubbed him frigid. He disagreed. He wasn't frigid. He was just too lazy to move. If his future wife was willing to put in the extra effort, he would gladly do it. In short, because he was too lazy, he lived a life free of worldly desires. Even if he had someone he liked, he didn't deliberately let his thoughts stray to such things. If you like someone, do you automatically have to have an urge towards them? Do you have to want to sleep with them? Isn't it okay to just be happy together? Aw, he's ace. Oh, I loves it. I bet you he's Demi. I bet you. It wasn't. Oh, he is. Listen to this. It wasn't until Lin Qingyu suddenly asked him that he realized that he did want to sleep with him. Even if he'd be tired half to death, he would probably think it was worth it. Using the word sleep was polite. What he wanted to say was something more vulgar. He wanted to dirty Lin Qingyu, leave all kinds of marks on Lin Qingyu's body, let him be contaminated with his own scent. He even wanted to say some unsavory, dirty talk into his ear. If it wasn't for Lin Qingyu's use of the word dirty, he wouldn't have realized that he actually had such a fetish. That's so cool. After understanding his own intentions, Gufu Zhou suddenly found himself so greasy and wretched. Oh, why did he have to have such a side to him? If he starts to lust after Lin Qingyu's body, then what was the difference between him and the likes of the Emperor and Xiao Qiang? So much. A world of difference. You're okay. Shocked into sitting from his deathbed, he realized, I'm actually the Qiao thief? No. Lin Qingyu was originally his wife. What was wrong with him lusting after his own wife? Those who lusted after his wife were the Qiao thieves. But this cold beauty was meant for admiring, not for dallying with. Oh, but how he wished to dally with him. Gufu Zhou, now with his newly discovered worldly desires, couldn't help but wonder. Lin Qingyu was also a man. Could it be that he also had worldly desires? Naturally, Lin Qingyu didn't know what was going on in the strange head of his. He only felt that the other party's eyes, as he looked at him, were deep and dark, no longer as pure as in the past, as though he were now somewhat more mature. The two went back to bed. Gufu Zhou had long since seen through all of the enemy's situation and tactics. Eyes open, with his hands behind his head, he said, Qingyu, you're almost 20 years old. This is the time when you're full of animal spirit. How come I've never seen you? Do you understand what I mean? Gufu Zhou felt that he had already said it very clearly. With Lin Qingyu's intelligence, it was impossible he wouldn't understand. Lin Qingyu, I don't understand. Come on, you must understand, Gufu Zhou teased. Or do you also have no interest at all in these matters? I certainly do not have any interest. But why would you use also? All of Gufu Zhou's attention was on the first half of Lin Qingyu's statement. It can't be. You're not lazy. Why aren't you interested at all? Lin Qingyu thought for a while and said,
Probably because I've seen a lot and touched a lot.
He had lost count of how many men's bodies he had seen, of women's bodies as well. He wasn't proficient at gynecology, but dabbled in it regardless. When he had been traveling with his mentor, he had delivered babies for pregnant women. As far as he could remember, he had never seemed to have had any special reaction to touching someone's body. It seemed that only Gufu Zhou's body had made him feel that ruined hand feeling, making him flustered when he touched that key part.
Gufu Zhou choked and said, Studying medicine is really scary.
So both of them are only into each other. I love it. I love it. So cute. Not realistic, but very good. I like it. Gufu Zhou slept late, and getting up the next day was a disaster. Lin Qingyu dragged Gufu Zhou up from bed, asked Hua Lu to bring breakfast, and watched as he begrudgingly ate his porridge.
Qingyu, when do I get to rest?
Officials of the Dayu, except for the New Year, could only rest on the 15th day of each month. Fuck, that would suck. Lin Qingyu helped him do the math and said,
In 10 days.
Gufu Zhou's handsome face twisted.
10 days? Save me!
After Gufu Zhou got dressed, Lin Qingyu was about to send him out of the mansion when he saw Yan Yin running to report.
General, madam, there is news from the palace. The Emperor has an unbearable headache and the Crown Prince's wound is acting up. There will be no morning court today.
Gufu Zhou was stunned by the sudden surprise. Save for the night of their second marriage, Lin Qingyu had never seen him so excited. As soon as Yan Yin finished speaking, he disappeared. In the blink of an eye, he reappeared in bed. The quilt swelling once again. Lin Qingyu chuckled lightly. He instructed the servants not to approach the bedroom so as to allow the general to sleep to his heart's content. Not long after the news of the suspension of morning court, there came another messenger from the palace. The emperor's illness was getting worse by the day, and the imperial hospital was helpless. The emperor finally couldn't take it anymore and once again summoned Lin Qingyu to the palace. Lin Qingyu examined the emperor's pulse and adjusted the previous prescription. After drinking it for a few days, the emperor's symptoms lessened in intensity. It stood to reason that Lin Qingyu should be rewarded, but his heart was still full of anger. When he thought of how this gentle and submissive beauty in front of him was already married, of how he, as the emperor, still had someone he couldn't possess, it was inevitable that feelings of unwillingness and resentment would grow in his heart. You're near death. Just sit down. Were he but an ordinary courtier's wife, forcibly seizing him would have been of no matter. But he was Gufu Zhou's wife. A few days later, Gufu Zhou submitted to him a report. From the deployment of troops and horses to the delivery of food and fodder, he had analyzed the battle situation in the northwest in a very thorough manner. After reading it, no matter how unwillingly, the emperor still sent the report to the northwest. The emperor refused to restore Lin Qingyu to his official position, and Lin Qingyu did not take the initiative to mention it. He merely said that he was unsure about the efficiency of some ingredients, and he had to go to the Imperial Medical Office to consult their books. The emperor reinstated Lin Qingyu's right to access the Imperial Medical Office. In addition, Lin Qingyu went to the palace every 3 days to examine the emperor's pulse. Except for having no official position or salary, it was no different from the past. They're just doing this for free? Lin Qingyu had never cared about the official position or salary. Marrying Gufu Zhou was simply a solution out of a desperate situation. If he wanted a safe and secure life with Gufu Zhou, they still had a lot to do. I love them. Gufu Zhou waited and waited and waited. Finally, it was his once-a-month rest day. Lin Qingyu happened to be scheduled for a visit at the palace that day. When Lin Qingyu got up, he made sure to keep his movements light. Then, thinking about it, it seemed there was no need. Gufu Zhou wasn't the type to be woken up with just a bit of noise, after all. Unexpectedly, as soon as his feet landed, he heard a low, hoarse voice from the upper bunk.
Qingyu.
Lin Qingyu was surprised.
Why did you wake up?
Gufu Zhou closed his eyes and said weakly,
You're going to the palace today. I'll see you off.
Lin Qingyu was stunned, and a warmth that shouldn't have appeared in winter rose in his heart. He said, though,
You're on the verge of passing out. How could you possibly see me off?
Gufu Zhou sat up sleepily, rubbed his eyes, and said automatically,
No matter how sleepy I am, I have to see my wife off to work.
Lin Qingyu said with a smile,
There's no need. You should go back to sleep.
Gufu Zhou forced himself to get out of bed.
No, you see me off every day. If I don't see you off, I would be absolute scum.
Gufu Zhou was so dead set on it that Lin Qingyu decided to let him do it. He originally thought that Gufu Zhou would do the same as he did, simply seeing him off the gate of the general's mansion. He didn't expect that Gufu Zhou would get in the carriage with him and see him off directly to the gate of the palace. Although Gufu Zhou had been dozing off against his shoulder in the carriage, not a word exchanged exchanged between them. Describing this early morning feeling was so touching as to move even heaven and earth would not be an exaggeration. It truly was precious. Once in the palace, the eunuch led Lin Qingyu to Qinjiang Hall. When the emperor told him to enter, Master Hou, the leader of the Tenjin camp, was just on his way out. The two passed each other, and Lin Qingyu caught a light fragrance. Lin Qingyu very quickly found out where the fragrance came from. The emperor showed him something. A crystal clear snow lotus. Simply judging from the color of the petals, you could tell that it was extraordinary. The emperor said,
Have a look. This may be good for my headache.
Lin Qingyu took a whiff of the snow lotus's fragrance and asked,
Dare to ask your majesty, is this from the northern regions?
Hearing the northern regions, the emperor seemed uneasy.
They say it was collected from the extreme north of the northern regions.
Then Qingyu smiled lightly and said,
It is indeed rare and It is indeed a rare and priceless ingredient. This student shall formulate a new prescription for your majesty, using the snow lotus from the north as an ingredient. It will definitely be able to produce twice the result with half the effort.
After taking his leave, Lin Qingyu spent a long time in the library of the Imperial Medical Office before returning to the general's mansion at dusk. As soon as he got off the carriage, he saw a luxurious carriage parked in front of the general's mansion. Such pomp would be overstepping the bounds of propriety for any common official. It was obvious as to who had come. Not to me, it's not. I don't know. The carriage arrived but a moment earlier than Lin Qingyu. As soon as the owner of the carriage alighted, he met face to face with Lin Qingyu. I think I know who this is. I'm gonna try it.
Is that beautiful? Is that beautiful? No, I had something later. It's no. It's no. Maybe. Wow, the bugs are bad. That's so gross. Ah, I can see the bugs outside my windows. They're small, the size of small birds. Jesus. It's that beautiful imperial physician. Lin Qingyu said, I am no longer an imperial physician, your highness. Then I shall call you Dr. Lin. The person who had come was Xiao Ji, the fourth prince. With him was his steward, ever inseparable from him, surnamed Xie, and with a single name, Rong. Lin Qingyu had no interest in pretty idiots. Only smart people held his interest. Compared to Xiao Ji, he paid much more attention to Xie Rong. We are honored by His Highness's presence. But was the general expecting you? No, what I meant is that he should be. Last time the general promised to show me his Qingyan Jiu spear and his Fergana horse. Today, I happened to be passing by the general's mansion and suddenly thought of this, so I just... Xiao Ji smiled awkwardly. Sirong bowed to Lin Qingyu and said politely, His Highness, on a whim, came uninvited and disturbed the general and his wife. If it is inconvenient for the general, next time we shall send a letter in advance before bringing down His Highness. Lin Qingyu said, Today is the general's rest day. There is no inconvenience. Please come in, your highness. Once they entered the mansion, Xiao Ji looked around curiously and asked, Why do I not see General Gu? Lin Qingyu guessed, At this hour, he should be playing. Xiao Ji looked completely confused. He raised his head and asked Sirong, Does the general also play? Sirong said, General Gu's play may be different from your highness's play. Xiao Ji grinned and said, I understand. For example, my play is to eat and drink, and the general's play is to ride horses and shoot arrows? Sirong smiled and nodded. Your highness is wise. Lin Qingyu said, Your highness, may I ask that you wait in the hall for a while? I will go and invite the general. Huantong, please serve tea to His Highness. Xiao Ji took a sip of the tea from the general's mansion. His eyes lit up and he was filled with praise. This is delicious. This might even taste better than the tea in the palace. Arong, why don't you give this a try too? Sirong shook his head and said, Your Highness, you mustn't forget etiquette when you are outside. Xiao Ji was a little disappointed. All right. Don't you find it strange, Your Highness? Sirong said. In terms of etiquette, it would be better for the general's wife to stay and entertain the guests. Then why did the madame go to personally call the general? The madam doesn't seem like someone who doesn't understand etiquette. Xiao Ji thought for a while but couldn't think of a reason. Why? Sirong smiled lightly and said, The madam probably has something to tell the general in private. Lin Qingyu found Gu Fuzhou in the bedroom. Gu Fuzhou had a strip of black cloth tied over his eyes. In front of him was a porcelain bottle that Lin Qingyu used to hold medicine. A red rope was tied to the mouth of the bottle, and the other end of the red rope was tied to the beam of the house. Hearing Lin Qingyu's footsteps, Gu Fuzhou pulled the black cloth up, revealing smiling eyes. Qingyu, I'll show you something good. Saying so, Gu Fuzhou put the black cloth back on. He pushed the porcelain vase hard, and the vase began to sway back and forth. Oh God, I know where this is going. Gu Fuzhou, too, swayed left and right.
perfectly avoiding being hit by the vase every time. What a fucking idiot. The corners of Gufu Zhou's lips rose up. They're including memes in this.
How? I practiced for a whole hour.
Oh, God. How many of those did he break on his head? Lin Qingyu stepped forward and grabbed the swinging porcelain vase. He said,
Xiaoji and his eunuch are here.
Gufu Zhou raised his eyebrows.
Right now? They're already in the mansion.
Gufu Zhou smelled the familiar light scent, and the corners of his lips rose even higher. He stretched out his hand, pretending to grab the porcelain bottle. Instead, he hugged Lin Qingyu's waist, having achieved what he wished. Lin Qingyu allowed him to hold him. He stretched out his hand and tore off the black cloth.
Also, Xiao Qiang really did send the Tanji camp to the northern regions. The Emperor must be quite dissatisfied about this.
Huh? Okay. I hope it's okay. Looking at the beauty with a light medicinal fragrance in his arms, Gufu Zhou, though with a heart like a frisky monkey and a mind like a cantering horse, was still able to set aside some portion of his brain to think.
Does Dr. Lin mean today? Isn't it a bit too early?
I hope I'm not dropping frames. I keep getting alerts that OBS is cutting me off. Well, as long as it's recording, I guess. Lin Qingyu pushed Gufu Zhou away and said,
There's no need to say too much. We can just sound him out for now.
The two returned to the front hall to meet their guests together. In front of Xiaoji and Sirong, Gufu Zhou was deep and reserved, sedate and taciturn. Even Sirong could not have imagined that, not long ago, General Gu had been in his room practicing how to not be hit in the head by a swinging porcelain bottle. Holy fuck, I love these guys so much. After exchanging greetings, Gufu Zhou ordered someone to present the Qinyan Juzhou spear. This spear was so heavy that most people couldn't hold it. It took at least 2 grown men to lift it. Xiaoji circled around the Qinyan Juzhou spear a few times, making a few wow sounds. He turned his head and said excitedly to Sirong, Arong, can you feel the murderous spirit from the northwest? Sirong said,
The spear is nourished by blood. The general spear possesses a spiritual quality.
Xiaoji tried to pick up the Qinyan Juzhou spear, but no matter how hard he tried, he only managed to barely lift it a fraction using both hands. He couldn't help but sigh.
This spear is heavy enough to smash a person to death, but General Go is able to wield it one-handed to cut down countless enemies. You're truly worthy of being the greatest warrior of the Dayu.
In the face of the prince's praise, Gufu Zhou still cherished words like gold.
Your Highness bestows undeserved praise.
Having seen enough of the spear, Gufu Zhou took them to the stable. A fine steed was drinking water with its head down. Feeling the presence of strangers, the horse raised its neck vigilantly and flicked its tail restlessly. This horse was black as ink, with slender limbs and a thick mane, completely different from the ordinary horses seen outside. Only that due to a long period of inactivity, it was now a lot fatter than it was when it first arrived in the capital. Okay. Xiaoji was amazed and asked, What's its name? Lin Qingyu gave Gufuzhou a playful look and said,
Xiao Bai.
Xiao Ji looked confused.
But it's black,
Gufuzhou said solemnly.
Indeed. Your Highness, would you like to ride it?
Xiao Ji was both startled and delighted.
Can I?
Sirong disapproved.
A prize horse is spirited and very loyal to its master, and your Highness isn't good at riding. I hope your Highness will reconsider.
Gufuzhou said,
With me here, nothing will happen.
Xiao Ji stroked Xiao Bai's inky back, and his heart was tempted.
There shouldn't be any problem if I just ride it for a walk around, right, Arong?
Sirong sighed helplessly, cupped his hands in salute, and said,
Then might I trouble the general to stay by his side to look after him?
Gufuzhou took Xiao Ji to ride the horse, while Lin Qingyu and Sirong stayed to one side and watched. It was not difficult to see that the relationship between Xiao Ji and Sirong was by no means an ordinary master-servant relationship. Xiao Ji obviously relied heavily on Sirong, consistent with what Gufuzhou had said. But Lin Qingyu couldn't make out any of Sirong's paranoid side. It could be assumed that he was also quite proficient at hiding his true colors. Lin Qingyu said casually,
His Highness is quite innocent and unaffected. When the Crown Prince ascends the throne, being the idle prince of a fief should be quite good for him.
Sirong's eyes dimmed slightly, but he also very quickly presented a smile even better than that of a woman's.
What the madam says is true.
The author has something to say. Salted fish.
It's not that I can't. I'm really just lazy. Believe me. Ooh.
Oh, wow. So I did get disconnected there for a few times because it says that I'm now streaming again twice. So, goodness. All right, I am going to leave that there. And then next Tuesday, we will start on chapter 70 and go to 73, to which we do have the things for. So that's good. Yeah, I don't have that all much to say. I wanted to get done before 9 and it's 8:59, so we're right on schedule. Wow. So it just completely dropped everything. Let me see here. I'm going to refresh this. And I'm going to refresh this. And yeah. So, well, at least it's been recorded. So that's something. That's so weird. Yeah, it says that I'm not streaming. Oh, well, I've recorded it. It's recorded, so that's something, and that's good. The recording doesn't. One person did? I don't remember that at all. Someone chatted during the stream? Huh? Did I miss... Did I? Shit? Nothing ever popped up. I don't remember any... Oh. That's weird. Twitch is saying that someone chatted, but I don't have any chatter in my stream, so I don't know. Okay. So, let me go back to this. Come on, Stream Deck, you're very slow. Okay, let's go back to just chatting. Right, so that's it for tonight's episode. I know it wasn't 4 chapters, it was 3, but they were a bit longer than The Wife is First, so I'm okay with that. And I did want to get done, especially because tomorrow is going to be crazy freaking busy. So, I hope you've enjoyed tonight's episode. You can join us again next Tuesday, where we will be continuing this story. We'll be starting at chapter 70, and whether that'll be 3 chapters or 4, I don't know yet. We'll see. Usually, Tuesdays are the shorter of the 2 streams, so probably 3. But again, it all depends on how busy work is the day before. Could be 2. We don't know. For our stream tomorrow, we will be continuing on with the next 4 chapters of The Wife is First. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but that is what we'll be doing. And so Wednesdays will be The Wife is First until we get caught up, and Tuesdays will be Married Thrice to Salted Fish until we get caught up. If you're enjoying this and would like to have a say in what we read next in a third ongoing Danmei, please be sure to visit my About page on Twitch, where I have a voting thing, a poll where you can vote for I have a few Danmei stories that I've vetted, so I've read quite a bit of them, and I know they're good, so that's why they're on there for you to vote on. So please have a look at that. If you are a fanfic fan, I do have a podcast as well, Serdd's Audio Fanfictions that's my website.com. But Serdd's Audio Fanfictions is a podcast. It's available on Spotify and wherever you get your favorite podcasts. It is on a break for the summer, so as soon as cottage season ends, new chapters will be going up very consistently. And then after that, also the library also will be getting a podcast very, very soon, or if you're listening to this, it has. We'll also be getting a podcast soon entitled The Library Podcast Edition. Very fancy and creative, I know. So if you want to take this podcast or this stream, if you want to take these Danmei stories with you, you can do so with that. I think that's it. That's all. I will again be adding the recommended Danmei that I mentioned at the very beginning onto the poll for us to vote on. If you ever have it, I will also, if you ever have any questions about what other stories those other stories are about, please pop into the chat and give me an ask, and I will be very, very excited to go over them all with you. All right. Once again, I hope you had a wonderful night. Thank you so much for joining me, and I hope you enjoyed this episode. And until next time, happy listening.